Here it is, the King of Dead by Daylight. Today we're talking about Burger King Myers, demanded to an insane degree by you guys, achieving the like goal for this discussion before my Ghostface video had even been out for 12 hours. Absolute insanity. Thanks, guys. For this video, I'm raising the stakes a little more. If we get to 1,000 likes, I will go over the entire history of Michael Myers within Dead by Daylight, scrounging up as much as I can find. Now, let's return to the main course meal, our big, chunky boy. For those that don't know what Burger King Myers is, and there's most certainly quite a few people that don't, since I still get the occasional comment asking me to play Burger King Myers, despite our king being dead for a long time now. Burger King Myers was assassinated way back in 2021. It's almost been 3 years since our king has fallen. May he forever rest in peace. Even when it was still alive and breathing, I would get several people confused as to just what exactly turned Myers into the fast food addict. Burger King Myers was the combination of two add-ons, those add-ons being Vanity Mirror and Judith's Tombstone. Some people thought the add-on combo was Scratch Mirror and Judith's. I chalk this confusion up to Scratch Mirror being the way more popular add-on. That, and it forced you to stay in Tier 1, something you were also meant to do with Burger King Myers. You had to stay in Tier 1 with Vanity and Judith's Tombstone. So why is the Vanity Mirror so important to have over Scratch Mirror? Back in the day, Vanity Mirror would reduce the Michael player's movement speed, even within Tier 1, despite the benefits of the add-on not coming out until Tier 2. In Tier 2, you would get access to wall hacks within 16 meters, similar to Scratch Mirror. As I briefly touched upon, Judith's Tombstone was also needed. Back then, Judith's Tombstone movement speed debuff was also effective in all tiers. When combined with Judith's Tombstone, well, you can imagine what sort of monstrosity you would be working with. You would be actively slower than survivors, and not by a few percentages. The Michael would be much slower. One also has to remember, Tier 1 itself is only barely faster than survivors by 5%. Let's do the math real quick. So we have a base speed of 105% movement speed with Tier 1 Myers. We then have to subtract 9% for the Judith's Tombstone, meaning we'd have a movement speed of 96%. And then on top of that, we'd have the Vanity Mirror. That would decrease Michael's movement speed by 7%, meaning by the end of our triple patty burger, Myers was moving at the speed of 89%. A whopping 11% slower than survivors. Keep in mind, normal killers have a base movement speed of 115%, meaning you are 15% faster than survivors. That is what is considered the balanced level of being faster. So you are nearly that in reverse. Survivors could run in a complete straight line and you would physically never catch them, which is why Burger King Myers was often paired with Play With Your Food, so this sort of challenge was actually one a player could overcome. Even with all three Play With Your Food stacks, Myers would only be 4% faster than survivors, which is still slower than base Tier 1. A tier that is already crazy limited in what it can do. Since Myers was in Tier 1, on top of all of these awful disadvantages, Myers has a puny little lunge in Tier 1. Something you couldn't even rectify with Boyfriend's Memo, an add-on that increases the lunge of Tier 1 Myers, since both your add-on slots were already full. Also, something worth keeping in mind, since Burger King Myers took place during 2021 and all the time before that, there were no other movement speed perks. Well, a slight fib. Technically, you could also equip No One Escapes Death, and this would increase your movement speed by another 4%, but this would only work in endgame. That was it. This was your maximum potential with Play With Your Food, because Tier 1 Myers couldn't even gain Bloodlust. I might have said in my previous video that PTB Ghostface was the worst killer ever. I also sort of fibbed with that a little bit too. With these two add-ons, Myers was the worst killer in the game by far. He was the worst killer this game has ever seen. As mentioned before, the counterplay to this Myers was just running straight. This is all survivors had to do, and if doing so, they would win. Without a shadow of a doubt, they would win. So why was Burger King Myers killed? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. Within the patch notes of 5.3, I remember something along the lines of the devs saying, while these two add-ons were used for the additional challenge, it just isn't something they intended. Which is interesting since it wasn't doing anything problematic in any sense. Survivors were getting free, easy victories, and us content creators were being thrown into loony bins for attempting this challenge. I think the more likely answer for this nerf was just because Vanity Mirror was so absolute garbage. It already got a reduced mirror read than Scratch Mirror. It was half as much. Scratch Mirror can see players from 32 meters away, while Vanity Mirror could only do so from 16 meters. Tier 2 had a tear radius of 16 meters as well, meaning without add-ons or perks, survivors would always hear your tear radius, which means they know the Myers player could be spying on them. Which is why, for obvious reasons, Dead Rabbit or Modern Abuse was often paired with Vanity Mirror. For those that don't know what Dead Rabbit is an add-on for Michael Myers that reduces his tear radius in Tier 2 by about 4 meters. Modern Abuse is a perk that would tone down your tear radius by 8 meters when you're not in chase. It's also important to remember that, as mentioned before, the mirror only worked in Tier 2, so you didn't even get all the benefits of the mirror until you put in some work. Work that was even harder than usual since Myers would already be in the awful Tier 1, but the reduced movement speed made things even more difficult for the poor Myers player wanting to use their funny mirror. It wasn't even less map dependent than Scratch Mirror since you were only slightly faster than Scratch Mirror, and that's with Michael getting to Tier 2. It's not like the movement speed debuff went away once you went to Tier 2. Oh no, it was there to stay, which meant most Michaels would still pair it with Play With Your Food, something that was already done with Scratch Mirror. The final cherry on top was that tier up, the map-wide notification to everyone that they were going up against Myers, something that Scratch Mirror didn't have to worry about since you were just staying in Tier 1, meaning the Myers player could have a pretty alright chance at sneaking up on multiple players, rather than as soon as Myers gets his ability, everyone just knows what's going on. Why would anyone ever choose Vanity Mirror over Scratch? There was just no reason to do so at all. Extra work, no element of surprise, bigger tear radius, way less wallhack potential, just as map dependent as Scratch Mirror. Most of the stuff you would have to do to compensate for Scratch Mirror's weakness were things you had to do for Vanity Mirror. It was just a hard mode Scratch Mirror. With all of those reasons, it totally makes sense for Vanity Mirror to be buffed. And now it's a much more usable add-on since they removed the movement speed penalty completely. Now, as for Judith's Tombstone, this one is a bit more perplexing. It was always overshadowed by its little brother, the Tombstone Piece, since it took much longer to get to Tier 3 to actually Mori survivors. And of course, as we mentioned, the slower movement speed, meaning Play With Your Food was once again nearly essential for the character when using Judith's Tombstone, since he once more was going to have a very difficult time getting to Tier 3 with a slower movement speed and added difficulty of a very large amount of stock being necessary to even get there. That being said, I would not go as far as to say this add-on was a bad one. Nowadays, I would say it's actually very underrated, but that's a video for another time. Back then, it was still good. It was just, why would you ever pick this add-on over Tombstone Piece? It just had very similar issues to the Vanity Mirror versus Scratch Mirror. It was a lot of extra work with only minor benefits over the Tombstone Piece. Really the only big one being the ability to continue mooring individuals after killing a survivor. With the Tombstone Piece, once a survivor is killed, Myers is brought back to Tier 2. With Judith's Tombstone, Myers doesn't go back to Tier 2, he stays in Tier 3, meaning he can kill survivors for the entire duration of Tier 3. For those that aren't familiar, Tombstone works as follows. Once Myers gets to Tier 3, which takes quite a bit longer than normally, but once he gets there, when he's right behind the survivor, the prompt to kill will come up for Myers. Once tapped, the survivor will be just that, murdered on the spot. Doesn't matter how many hooks they've gotten, how many cookies they've left for Santa, they are instantly killed right on the spot. Continuing to Mori people, that sounds pretty powerful, right? Well, that comes with a pretty big weakness. The element of surprise is no longer with Myers. In Tier 3, Myers also has a normal size tear radius. There are counterplays to Tombstone. They can't actually tombstone a survivor that is currently doing something, whether that's a totem, a generator, or if they're vaulting. The survivor basically has to just be running. They have to be out in the open for the Myers to kill the survivor. That, and once again with the slower movement speed, survivors had plenty of time to run to a locker, stay on the gen, forcing Myers to pick them off the gen, or just simply loop him and waste his time. While this option was the most risky, one has to remember that Myers still has reduced movement speed, making it fairly easy to run Myers out for the duration of Tier 3. At that point, Myers would just be a slower M1 killer, having to work his way back to Tier 3. Even with all that, that still sounds like, well, that's not too bad. A survivor is dead. It should be easy for the Myers to get a victory. Not exactly. The time to do gens back then was actually quicker. It didn't require as much time to be finished. If the survivors were smart and split up on gens, Myers could definitely still easily be beaten. He's slower with Judas Tombstone. Gens didn't take as much time, and if survivors wanted to play extra safe, they could do any of the counters I mentioned before. They would still be hooked, but they wouldn't be dead, meaning the other two survivors had time to do gens while Myers walked all the way over to a survivor with reduced movement speed, had to chase the survivor for X amount of time before they hop into a locker, gen, totem, window, whatever, pull the survivor out of the locker, hook them, and then travel the map and go find another survivor with the reduced amount of gen time. One dead teammate wasn't the end of the game for survivors. And just because there would now be a dead teammate, that teammate was still in the match for a period of time, meaning more things could have gotten done while the Myers had to take longer to get to Tier 3, all while being slower. Lots of negatives to Judas Tombstone. It's just interesting to me that it would be buffed considering how powerful the Tombstone piece is. Maybe it was just done because the developers felt it was weird that the more rare Eerie Tombstone was weaker than the less rare Purple Tombstone. Or maybe it was just a hate crime against our beloved Burger King Myers. And by our beloved, I mean mostly your guys' beloved. I'm sure most of us content creators weren't a big fan of Burger King Myers. I most certainly wasn't. It was funny for the first few times, but oh boy did I get to loathe Burger King Myers by the 10th time it was requested by viewers. It just wasn't the most pleasant experience to play. Perhaps it was streamers' fault it was nerfed. Maybe the developers saw the pain, the agony it was brought, the moaning, and they decided to tweak it. I think any of these answers could be the culprit. That all being said, it is now time for me to brag about one of my greatest achievements in Dead by Daylight. May I be as bold to say the greatest achievement DBD has ever seen? And yet, you may never have even heard of it. In my very last match ever as Burger King Myers, the day before Burger King Myers was taken from us, as a final send-off to him, I had the greatest Burger King Myers match of all time. This much is certain. I got into a match with a cheater, and I won. With every disadvantage imaginable. It was even on Haddonfield, being oddly thematic, but a terrible map for killer. The survivors were even trying to save the cheater, but despite all of their best efforts, the Lord, the King of Dead by Daylight, Burger King Myers came out on top, defending Dead by Daylight against monstrosities that didn't belong. The defender of justice. He may be gone now, but he sure did go out with a bang. Rest in peace, hero. If you would like to see the full Cheater Burger King Myers video, feel free at your own risk. It was recorded a long time ago, so the quality of it isn't the greatest. However, I don't believe you'll see footage of Burger King Myers beating a cheater anywhere else. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, stay safe in the fog, friends.